The scripture reading this morning comes from Joshua, in the 24th chapter. It's in the bulletin if you'd like to follow along. Here's what Joshua said. So remember, revere the Lord and serve with sincerity and faithfulness. Put away from you any gods your ancestors served across the Euphrates River or in Egypt, and serve only the Lord. If you decide that you're not willing to serve the Lord, then today is the day for you to choose whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors worshipped in the land beyond the great river, or the gods of the Amorites whose country you possess. But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. I want to share with you a list of items that there's a common bond between them. You'll probably figure it out as we go along. Chocolate chip cookies, microwave ovens, pacemakers, potato chips, penicillin, that little slinky thing that goes downstairs, fireworks, Post-it notes. Let me tell you about Post-it notes. You got some there. It was an interesting story back in the late 1980s. A doctor, a scientist for 3M Corporation had the task of creating an adhesive, a glue, that it was going to be so strong that what would happen is that once you applied it, those two objects would be permanent. You would not be able to get them separated. It would be the super glue before super glue had become super glue. But somehow it didn't quite work. Instead, this odd concoction they came up with, it would stick two items together, but then you could take them apart. And then you could put them back together, and you could take them apart. It worked with paper, it worked with metal, with wood, with plastics. But that really wasn't what he had in mind. A number of years later, one of his colleagues, Art Fry, he was frustrated. He was in a church choir, and on the weekly practices, they would get the hymns, and not only special music, but the hymns they were going to sing, and he put pieces of paper to mark the hymns that they were going to sing on Sunday, but unfortunately, by the time Sunday came around, the paper had either fallen out, or it had slipped in between the pages so you couldn't see where it was. He was frustrated. But somehow he came across this application that his fellow scientist had made, this super glue that wasn't very super. And he experimented with it. He attached it to these pieces of paper. And he noticed that you really could attach it and then take it off without tearing anything. He went to his weekly choir practice with this little pad of papers. And one hymn, he just put it on the page. It stuck. The second hymn, the third hymn, Sunday came and he opened up his hymnal and there they were still. And he just took them off, did a goody damage. He was pleased. He took them back to the office and started using them, writing notes to himself, reminders, writing notes to others as reminders, marking things. He thought this was a pretty good idea. So he started talking to people about it and said, hey, you want to try this? See what you think. They did. They thought it was a marvelous idea. They went to the upper echelons of the 3M company and said, hey, we may have an idea here. So they started production of, it wasn't called Post-it notes yet, but it was Post and Peel was the original name. And they did a test in some cities. Boise, Idaho was one of them. They went to all different companies. They just handed them out right and left. Here, try these. See what you say. See what you think. They came back in a few weeks, and the one comment that was constant was, how can we get these? We buy these. It was a very short time after that 3M started publishing the Post-it notes. And they were in all different office supply companies, stores all over. It wasn't too many years that they were selling about 50 million pads of those little things. Everybody loved them. You know what keeps in common with all these items I talked about? They were considered mistakes. Mistakes. That word, mistake, has kind of got a bum rap over the years, though. Because when we hear the word mistake, we often think, well, what did we do wrong? What went wrong? So sorry about that. Maybe next time. The original understanding of that word came from the Scandinavian languages back in the 1400s. It was really a combination of two words. Take, where you take something, you take a trip, you take on a project, you take a plan, you choose something, you take it, you commit to it, it's yours, you're going to do it. But these Scandinavian folks were kind of practical. They understood that anytime you take on something like that, it's probably not going to work out exactly the way you planned for it to do. And that was the miss word. It became mistake. And simply means that it's when you take on something, just be aware that most likely it's not going to work out exactly the way you plan on it. A mistake originally was a neutral word, meaning, well, yeah, sometimes a mistake doesn't turn out very well. That's true. But quite often, a mistake in their understanding actually would turn out to be better than they thought. All these items listed here, the mistake turned into something much greater than what they ever thought was going to happen. A mistake. Isn't that amazing? You read the quote from George Bernard Shaw where he said that a life spent making mistakes is not only honorable, but more useful than a life spent doing nothing. Somehow we came up with this idea that said that keep away from making mistakes. Is that fear of failure sometimes. Don't try something new. Don't try to change things. But a mistake is simply when you enter into something, you choose this is what you're going to do, and along the road you have to modify your plans. Along the way you have to revise, you have to change, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. But you keep in mind what you're going for. A mistake is just a correction. Whether it turns out really good or maybe really bad. Sometimes it's out of your control, sometimes it's in your control. So you choose. Along the road somewhere, this new phrase came out of excellent mistakes. Excellent mistakes. The combination of that simply means that when you choose to do something, and you go into it knowing that most likely you'll have to revise it a little bit on the way. You'll have to modify it a little bit on the way. You'll have to kind of massage it sometimes so it keeps going smoothly. But you do that. But an excellent mistake raises the bar a little bit. What it says is that some things, though, that you take on are so meaningful, so significant, so important, that you know no matter what happens, you're going to give it your best because you believe in it. An excellent mistake. There's a lot of writers now putting out things saying, that's what life should be. A series of your excellent mistakes. Not that you fail, just that you find something meaningful, you find something significant, worthy of your best. And when that happens, and when something comes up and challenges you, or an obstacle appears, you don't back down. Instead, you say, well, I guess I saw that coming. But what I'm doing is so important. I'm going to continue pursuing it. Excellent mistakes. Now, I think we understand that as a congregation. I really do. If have a conversation with Lance sometime, and ask him if the definition of mistake kind of parallels his experience with the counseling center. That the mission was clear, and it was important, and it was dynamic and vital, and along the way there were some curves, there were some twists, there were some changes, there were some modifications that had to be made, because that's just the way organizations work. But it was excellent. It was so important, it was so significant, it was so vital that he couldn't let it go, and it couldn't let go of him either. An excellent mistake, that counseling center. I think we understand how that works. You can apply that to the food bank, the ERA. If Ruth Ann were here, we could talk about the ministry to the American Indian. And I guarantee she'd raise her hand and say, yeah, we've had a lot of twists and turns. But how excellent, how meaningful, how significant it has been, and it is. Go talk to Bev. Ask her if her sailing has been smooth in her Incarnation Institute for Sex and Faith. You know, she's had to deal with people that probably don't want to hear what she had to say. Or they might have been surprised when she started saying, you're going to talk about that? But how critically important her ministry is. An excellent mistake. Well, another excellent mistake, I think, is Joshua's understanding of what the people were going to go through. If you understand Joshua, up to this time, he's been pretty critical of the people, saying you have not lived up to your covenant with Yahweh. You have not been the people that you said you were going to be. But in the 24th chapter, there seems to be a little bit of a shift here. Instead, he's going to remind them, now remember, Yahweh, God, the Eternal One, you have life because of God. You are no longer slaves in Egypt because of God. You have life itself because of God. You have meaning in your life because of God. This day, though, see, he's coming at the very end of his ministry, his earthly ministry. This day, though, you need to choose. He's being very honest. He's actually being very caring and very open. You have to choose which path you are going to go. You can go back and worship the gods, plural, of your ancestors before they crossed the Great River. You know, that was what happened. That the ancient civilizations, any culture had numerous gods, little g, with essence. Gods of this, God of this, God of this, more the merrier. So, Joshua knows that. How easy, how more comfortable it would be in many ways for them to go back and worship the numerous gods of their ancestors. You can do that. You can do that. Or you can worship the gods of the land in which you live now, of the Amorites. And that was common. There really was when you merged with a culture, when you entered into a new civilization, quite often you would kind of make the best of the best. Ooh, I like your God. I think I'll adopt him or her or it. But I'm going to take along some of mine too. So it's just a smorgasbord, if you will, of gods. You can do that, he says to the people. You can do that. Or you can follow, or you can revere, or you can worship the Eternal One. The one that brought you life, the one that brought you out of slavery, the one that has put you right here. You can do that. But you have to choose. They raise their hand. Yeah, okay. But if you keep reading, interestingly enough, he says, now wait a second. Before you get all excited, let's talk about excellent mistakes. I don't think that's in the phrases, actually. But it could be, it should be, because that's what he's talking about. Let's talk about this excellent mistake that you're getting ready to make. Because this God is jealous. This God really wants you only to be worshiping him, her. Not all these other gods. Not all these other ways. And this God is very concerned about you. Because this God wants to make sure that you stay faithful to your covenant. That you stay faithful to who you've been created to be. Stay faithful to this life that has been given to you. This God really cares, but this God really cares. So, Understand, if you choose the Eternal One, Yahweh, the Lord, you need to understand this journey that you're getting ready to take is not going to be a straight line. It's going to be a mistake. There's going to be all different times when your lives are going to be turned upside down and inside out. You know, that's the way God is. Have you ever noticed that? If you read the Scriptures, you'll find time after time after time where God comes to somebody and they're stretched out on their easy chair, their feet propped up. They think, I've got it made. I know exactly how my life is going to be. And God says, hey, we've got a project. I've got something for you and I to do together. But God, I can't talk. That's okay. I don't have enough energy. That's okay. I don't have enough money. That's okay. God constantly comes time and time and time again and says, hey, we're going to do something together and it's going to change you. And it may very well change the world. Joshua is telling the people, if you choose God, get ready to be transformed. If you choose God, get ready for your path not to be a straight line, but it's going to be curvy sometimes, and it'll be up to you to make it work with me, God says. Joshua says to the people, are you ready for that? And oh, by the way, it will be an excellent mistake, because you will find meaning in your life like you've never found before. You will find significance in your life like you didn't know existed. You will find fulfillment. You will be a peoples that changes the world. I think it's time for us as individuals. I think it's time for us as United Christian Church. I think it's time for us as people of faith to start making more excellent mistakes. For example, Bev mentioned an announcement, and if you're aware of, over the last few years, the Amen group has been doing a marvelous job, a miraculous job of informing us, educating us, inspiring us, giving us activities to fight against racism and all the affiliated afflictions that come along with it. Recently, one of the new projects is to do a flag garden and maybe a labyrinth in addition. Right up there maybe in the front. So people drive by and they'll see it, they'll recognize who we are. But you talk about an excellent mistake getting ready to happen, oh my gosh. We're going to have so many twists and turns on that. You know, we told you what happened when we put out on the reader board about the white privilege class. And people came out of the woodwork to say, how dare you do that sort of stuff. It was vastly in the favor of those who, I call them boo birds, who didn't want to see what we were doing. Guess what we'll do when we do that? It's going to be the same thing. But our voice will be heard. And do you think our voice needs to be heard? Do you think that we have something to say to not only our community, but to the world, and maybe to each other? Do you think that we have something to share? I do. But it's not going to happen if we just stay huddled up here. We have to reach out. That could be a marvelously wonderful, excellent mistake waiting to happen. But we have to choose. In a little while, today we're going to talk about the proposals to the Constitution and the bylaws. I think that's another excellent mistake getting ready to happen. Now, a lot of the proposals have to do with just cleaning up the Constitution and bylaws, kind of bringing it up to date of where we already are. But some of it has to do with some other changes of the church council structure, changes in what direction we might be going, changes in how we relate to each other, changes, well, you've read them. You've seen the presentation. You've received through the email the complete documents. So you see what's going on, and that's going to require some changes. That's going to require some transformation of the way that we sometimes look at ourselves, sometimes the way we look at each other outside. And I think it's going to be excellent. The committee that put this together felt the same way. The council feels the same way. So it's the congregation's turn to choose. To choose. We have something in the budget. Many of you maybe don't know this. We've talked about it. But in the budget, we have this little line item called Grants for New Initiatives. And as simply as it says, we have some money set aside that if you have a mission, if you're a member and you have a mission, a ministry that you think is very, very needed, maybe something that will affect the church, something that will affect the congregation, the community, something that will affect the world, something that you think is really worth doing, we have some money to help. Kind of seed money. It's not a whole lot, but it's a good start. That's another excellent mistake getting ready to happen. Because there's a really good chance that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of you have some ideas, and you just need a gentle push. That's how most of the ministries of this congregation have started. Somebody had an idea, they had a vision, they had a mission that they thought was important. And they say, hey, how about? That's what this grant is for. And hopefully, we would have some wonderful, excellent mistakes made. Of people finding something so significant and be willing to try it, be willing to go into it, knowing that it's not going to be easy, but it could change the world. It could change us. Excellent mistakes. Joshua asked the Israelites to choose. I think I'm asking the same of us today. Let us choose this day whom we will serve. The comfort of last year, yesterday, or the God that says, we're not finished. We have things to do.